Hey, and welcome back to my channel, A Journey with Me. I am Mimi, for those of you who don't know. This video is going to be a little bit more about my personal journey and what got me to this spiritual journey. I would say that a really big turning point for me and what brought me onto my spiritual journey and my personal development journey is when I actually realised that nobody was going to save me. I got diagnosed with major depression and generalized anxiety when I was at university because I just felt like a complete fish out of water. I had no idea what I was doing there. I felt so inferior to everybody around me. I always felt inferior my whole life. And even as a kid, I felt so inferior. I felt ugly. I felt stupid. I felt not good enough. I felt fat. And I just couldn't understand. I just felt had such a low opinion of myself and a core belief system that I didn't know, like, who are you, and like, I think there was that core belief system that I wasn't good enough, and I was never the best friend, I was never the top marker in school, and I feel like I never was the one that got the boys, and this was always shown back to me by the collective. That was kind of reinforced. So this core belief system was reinforced all of my life, and then when I got to university, I think it was intensified by like 1,000. Like, it got really, really poorly. I was on medication. I had therapy. I had to quit, and I remember just being so desperate to have this feeling just stop. This and having such dark thoughts and not really understanding why I feel this way, and then like just really realizing that nobody was going to save me, and that was my kind of turning point to take action. Medication probably did help with that because I was so demobilized for university and making decisions that I feel like the medication gave me that oomph that I needed. I then started I got into the gym. I was trying to eat healthy meals. I was making more sensible decisions about my relationships because I got my first boyfriend at university, and I had no idea how to navigate that relationship, and it was very toxic. He had issues as much as I did, and I had no idea how to navigate it, especially with very, very bad mental health. And yeah, I feel like that was the catalyst for me. I just wanted to take the control back, and I thought there's got to be more to this feeling. And I was watching all these spiritual speakers, I was watching these personal development coaches. I think Till Swan was my first spiritual sort of exposure on YouTube. Jim Rohn was amazing. He's a spirit coach. He was a personal development coach. Tony Robbins. And I remember being at a party, and this guy said, "You need to watch or read this book called The Secret." And I think that's actually what the catalyst was for me to get on YouTube and then identify with all these speakers. And I remember feeling really good. Like, it was positive affirmations that were making me feel good, listening to these positive speakers all day and not like the news. And I feel like that just helped lift me. And I also was exposed to, I found a crystal at this point, just randomly, and like, wow, this is beautiful. Wanted to know a little bit more about this crystal, and it was starting to make me feel good. I did feel like it was healing me. And all of these things just go like, whoa, they really helped pulling me out of this really dark depression that I had. And then I kind of felt good enough to stop medication. And again, I feel like a lot of my relationships, usually partners that were potting me in these really dark, deep, depressive episodes, I had quite a lot of them. I say for 10 years of my life from university has just been a series of rinse and repeat cycle of feeling quite good, feeling all right, and then like within a month's time being at a dip and being really low again. And my life was just very much like that, like a roller coaster, up, down, up, down, up, down. And I think I used to think I was bipolar at one point. I remember I used to work on a psychiatric ward, and the patients used to say to me, "Oh, you are mental. You need a bed here. How have you not got a bed on here with me?" And I used to just laugh it off because I was very like bouncy and extroverted and probably quite manic for a lot of the time. But I was diagnosed with ADHD in my adulthood, and it makes sense. Um, I was talking to a friend about it, and she was like, "Mimi, I do think that you are." And I watched a video. I think it was on like some sort of ADHD website, and I literally cried because it just made complete sense. The emotional dysregulation, the sort of up and down episodes, the like feeling like really quite hyperactive. And bouncy, and the overexhaustion. I was so queen of giving it a go, but I'm not good at being consistent. So I feel like once I got into these personal development things and the spiritual elements and like all these tools, that I started to realize and started to feel like I was a good person and I was meant for more. and then I would be trying new things. So I thought, okay, let me try, I need some extra cash, let me try be a beautician. I'd done a lash course and things, and I think that was my first time outside of university, me going outside my comfort zone. And I was quite proud of that. I've always been, I think that's what separated me from a lot of my circle, is that I was always someone who wanted to be better. So I was always trying new things. I was always doing this course, that course, because I always felt like I had something to prove, and I was always trying to be this better person. Whilst it had its positivities of being this someone who was very ambitious and forward thinking, it also was I feel like partly fueled by that inadequate feeling and that inferior feeling, and trying to prove everybody wrong that I can do it myself. I feel like I'm my biggest critic. It wasn't just for other people, it was so I could feel validated, and that to show myself that I could do it. And I was quite, my biggest achievements was qualifying with a degree in childhood and youth studies when I went back to university at another time. But anyway, I digress. I feel like that was the biggest catalyst for me, was university, having anxiety and depression, and really realizing that nobody was going to save me, and that I had to help myself. And I feel like jumping into all these tools and wanting to understand these tools more and wanting to be a better person is what then was the start of my journey, because I wanted to take control back. I remember being angry at doctors, angry at mental health services, and thinking, oh, why are they so shit? I still feel shit. None of these things are helping, until I took matters into my own hands. And I mean, I tried everything. I went to church because I thought maybe it's a spiritual thing, like religious thing, maybe God could help me. I tried everything. I tried the physical with the health and the fitness. I tried the religious with the God, and it was the spiritual thing that helped the most, I would say. Now I'm on this kind of spiritual path and this personal development path. I think it started more with personal development, with wanting to just achieve a little bit more with my life. But I feel like my ADHD and my social life was made it very difficult for me to sustain things. I put a lot of money in entrepreneur businesses like drop shipping, selling products, a business, as I already mentioned, like beauty business. And I feel like, again, because I was always that person who was always making the effort with everybody around me and trying to maintain relationships, that it caused a lot of burnout often. I feel like that again contributed a lot to the highs and lows of whether it, and it I think it could be moderately sustainable until I ended up doing 3 courses, 2 jobs, trying to do my business, making sure that I'm still got a social life, trying to go to the gym and eat healthy, trying to keep on top of the meals. And that was again rinse and repeat cycle, because I was trying to maintain the things that got me out of depression, which was the gym and trying to eat healthy. And also, I was a very social person, and I'm thinking, I've got to maintain my relationships. I've got to make sure I go to that birthday. I better make sure I go to that wedding. I better make sure I go to this christening or baby shower. And I was always trying to make such a good effort, and it was to my own detriment, because it was that people pleasing, FOMO, and just habit. I think I was always just that social person. That's just what I did. But it never gave me chance to give my entrepreneur businesses a go. I lived in constant burnout and constant depression, anxiety. Again, because when you're doing all these things constantly, with all these things going on, you cannot think properly. I would say it was difficult to emotionally regulate or make some decision or understand some things that were going on in my situations or life events that happened, because I never gave myself space to think. And again, I'm someone who tried meditation a lot and journaling a lot, but again, even to this day, that is, even though it does help when I can get into it, but that's only when I take a life pause. So I stop everything and just focus on that I can really sort of get into the swing of it. But I think as a whole, in an initial toolkit, I think, to help get you out of a slum or depression episode, that they don't work. They didn't for me anyway. Just something important to point out. But yeah, again, but every low generated some epiphany, and it might have been a relationship with a boyfriend, it could have been a friendship where something is triggered in me where I'm like, wow, that's not me. And I just had a series of wake up calls with, whether it be friendship groups or whether it be a partner. And I feel like going on this spiritual journey and this personal development journey, I was always someone who was meant to be self-analytical, sometimes to my detriment, but actually sometimes like it's an absolute blessing, because it then helps me understand myself better and try to understand other people. I think getting that sweet spot of whether or not you want to understand people and get understanding you. I think understanding people in the sense of we're never going to understand people really fully, and it's moving into that compassionate side of them being unconscious. Michael Singer is a very good person who describes about people being unconscious, and same with Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now. When I could get into the swing of these things and picking up these books like The Power of Now or The Secret, these things, watching YouTubers, I found like listening to these motivational speakers and these spiritual healers and reading these books again are things that really help sort of propel my spiritual and personal journey, because it just made me feel good and it made sense to want to be a good person, to try and better myself, to understand that emotion better. And I think my life was from the age of 20 up to 29 has just been a series of very intense emotional events that threw me into a depressive episode, that then threw me into a spiritual, I don't know, like a spiritual hole, let's say, where I just wanted to understand myself in this situation. And then I would then be awoken with this huge epiphany and this realization that it's not me, it's them. And there was always some sort of wake up call. I do feel like my life has just been a series of spiritual awakenings, and the first depressive episode was just in university, and I've just had a series of these. And I feel like the more you get into yourself and the more you understand yourself and your situation, is the less frequently these happen, but the more intense they get. But your toolkit expands. What typically works doesn't always work, and I would say that is quite linked to my latest situation. So again, there was some things happening at work, and I just could not understand why I felt this way. And again, I was in this another low, thinking, why am I feeling like this again? I am so sick of this. And when you're misaligned and you're not doing what you should be doing, is when you feel a lot of resentment and a lot of anger. I would say that I ended up wanting to understand this a lot more, and I was introduced to very controversial, but magic mushrooms by a friend, just socially, like in this chocolate, you just eat it, blah blah blah. And I must have been feeling the calling a little bit more, and opening up intuitively a little bit more, as I then felt this calling to have like a whole bar, I think, which is about 5 grams, which is quite a lot. Can I just add, do not recommend unless you're doing it with somebody. But I feel like having those little bits of this being introduced to me was supposed to be introduced to me. I lived with this girl. She was going away for a bit, and I just felt this absolute huge calling to just have a whole bar. And I did, and it was absolutely horrific, and it was absolutely amazing all in one. What's magic mushrooms are supposed to do, I would describe it as really speeded up trauma therapy or speeded up therapy. And what it does is it just kind of unlocks a lot of things in your brain and helps you reconnect back with source or yourself, or you're conscious. It makes you conscious. I remember going back to it must have of having bad trips, like a series of bad trips. I think I just had lots and lots of, I'd be in really beautiful visuals, but then I would be plunged into these really dark moments. I could quite easily see how people would commit suicide on it, and how overwhelming it could be, because I just remember feeling horrendous. I think if you're in this particular emotional state, it just amplifies it, but what it's doing is it's bringing you through it so that you can heal it and release it. So what I'd gone through in my bad trips was the inadequacy feeling of not being good enough, and that higher calling, and just being a bit more aware of it. And I remember as it was coming to an end, I just felt so euphoric and so amazing and so connected that all I wanted to do was to strip off my clothes and walk down the street naked, because it didn't matter. I remember the end of the trip as it was coming out, like the mantra was, nothing matters, but everything matters. We are all one. We are all connected. And I just remember being a huge person that was bigger than the universe, or I was the universe, and then being a little speck of dust, almost being really relevant and being everything and all encompassing, to being quite irrelevant and just being a speck of dirt. And I say irrelevant, I don't know if that's the right choice of words, but it was all, like I said, it was all very much, and I still say this to now, everything like is light and dark, and like there is good and bad in everything. And it was that realization of that, and being conscious to just being connected to all these light and the dark and everything, and it was all beautiful. And I would say that is my longest period, for I would say about 6 months, as to when I didn't feel anxiety and depression, and I just felt like so connected and so powerful and so real and raw, and I genuinely loved myself for quite a while. And it was a really beautiful feeling, to be honest. And just to throw out there are a lot of countries. I think Canada is trying, but they are trialing. I can't say the actual medical term. It's like cyblicin or something like that. The actual the chemical in magic mushroom that it is being used as a treatment for anxiety and depression because it has got really profound results. Like it changed me as a person. I was a completely different person. I literally fully woke up but was able to sustain it. But I would say that life generally happens, and when you're an empathic person and you're an empathic person and you are someone who again is still not quite aligned with where you should be, then these intrusive thoughts and the anxiety and the depression can come back in because you're still not quite aligned. But I would say it still made me be able to listen more to these external powers. I was able to journal more, and I was doing tarot cards at this point, and tarot cards were just amazing because I was doing readings and it was like clarifying what I was thinking, so, or a conversation that I just had. And it was like, whoa, it wasn't predicting my future, but it was absolutely clarifying what I needed to do. And all of my cards, even to this day, point to what I'm trying to do now, which is to be a voice. I am someone, I can confidently say that I do give really good advice, and I'm really good at helping people and helping people feel heard and helping people feel motivated. And I think that's why I kind of always went into sort of mental health work or social work. So my biggest job before was a social prescriber. Or work and shadow work that I was doing. And shadow work is literally like therapy, but self therapy. Again, it can be quite difficult, but where you're peeling back the onions. And then I also use tarot cards to help with that. And I remember wanting to know why I didn't want to spend time with my family. I always felt really angry around my family. Really would just go to social events because that was the normal, but really detested it and actually avoided it for quite a while because I stepped into that. Well, nobody should make me feel how my family can make me feel. And they were very triggering for me. I didn't go to a lot of social family events. And it was through shadow work and tarot cards combined that I actually realized as to what that was and why I was so reactive to disrespect, or why it was such a big thing for me, whether it be friendships, boyfriends, work. Like disrespect was such a horrible thing for me. And actually through shadow work and tarot cards, it's where I learned that it was from growing up in a family where you were insulted, and I think everybody was. But again, as I said, being someone who's very empathic, I internalized every insult. Every time you said I was ugly, fat, black, darky, whatever, like all these things, I think I really did internalize, and I think stayed with me. And I think anything that remotely attacks my intelligence, so people commenting on my intellect, whether it be a joke or not, is something that I would react not the best to, or I would internalize. And I just feel like tarot cards and shadow work just help me understand that a little bit more. And it's really important to try and understand these things because that's how we heal and we release it. It's not about keep talking about these things, which is where I kind of moved away from counselling, on and off counselling all my life. But actually, it started to not really help, and it was just feeding the fire all of the time. I felt shadow work and doing my tarot cards combined are what helped me realize things, because tarot is also a good tool for not just clarification but bringing things to the surface that you haven't even thought of. There is a psychology term, I'm not sure if that's right, but Jahara's window, and I learnt that in college, and it's something that I love to this day, and I just try to sort of live my life by it and understand that that's how people are. Jahara's window, let's just say that you've got who you are, what you know, what other people know. You've got what only you know and you don't show to other people, and you've got your blind side, which is what you don't see and other people see about you. And then you've got the unknown, which is that bit that's not quite there yet, or come to the surface yet. Tarot card for me, I think, brings up that blind side. Same with all of these like personality tests or astrology. Like these things can help pinpoint elements of yourself that you might not be aware of, and that is why they are so amazing. And I've always been curious about them because the older I've got, the more I've aligned with those things that I never thought I was, doing these personality tests or astrological signs. Like that's not me. And actually, the older I've got, I've realised that it is me. Tarot cards for me will bring up the blind side. That's what other people see and what you don't see. And that's where if you're not someone who's quite self-aware, then it can be quite challenging to grow through these quite toxic traits or behaviors unless you're around a circle of people that make you feel safe, or like where communication is healthy, which is a key one. Healthy communication amongst friends where you can speak your truth and they are healthy relationships. And again, that's something that just got stronger and stronger with me in time, because it was so important for me to be honest and upfront. And the stronger I got, the more I wanted to be that person. But of course, then you start to misalign with people where that is not their truth and that is not who they are, and they want relationships based on things that aren't true. And that's just, again, not how I aligned and how I come apart from a lot of my friendships, because I just started, the more I was stepping into my authentic self and the more I was speaking my truth, the more misaligned we were. And the more I was ascending into wanting to do better, again, the more misaligned we were. And that's not me coming from a place of judgment. As someone who has felt so bad about themselves all their life, I've put the work in, and I've put in the blood, sweat, and tears. I've done the research, I've done the tools. I'm not coming from a place of judgment, but it's almost like, I have done it. How come you're not doing it? I can no longer empathize or communicate with you because we understand things completely different now. And I'm just moving out of that guilt element, because I used to feel like I was being so judgmental, feeling so guilty that I couldn't be a better friend. But no, we're just not aligned anymore, and that is fine, and that is growth. And I'm getting more comfortable with that aligning with who I am. And that's the journey now. This is who I am, and this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to help other people do. And this is what has instigated me making a channel and wanting to speak my truth. I know, like, when I had that first depressive episode, I actually wanted to, because I was writing a lot and I was being really creative with my words, and I wanted to make a channel, and I could make a post, a Facebook post, and it would get a lot of engagement. And I thought, oh, you've got a lot to say here and people can relate. So I tried to make a Facebook page, but again, it didn't really amount to much because of life got in the way, and I just prioritized other things over that. But again, I think I felt good and I was elevated with that because I was leaning into what I should be doing. And every time I sort of go back to my tarot cards, or I go into that spiritual development, or I'm engaging with a patient at work and it's something like to do with making them feel good and making them feel better, then I was always aligned with what I think is my life mission and my life purpose, to help people, and help people feel good, and maybe doing that through my journey. And I feel like that's what's brought me here, is that I want to be able to share my story and have people relate and have them understand. And for me, that is the spiritual journey as well. It's just that constant realization of when I'm being a hypocrite, or when I'm contradicting, or when I am at fault here, or that's a reoccurring pattern here. How can I try to understand that more and unpicking that? And then also, sometimes you might, like, my ADHD and my emotional empathy that I have, like being so intense, is who I am. And I now see my empathy as a navigation tool. I see my how I feel about things as a very good tool with knowing what I should be doing and where I should be going. And any time that I have felt overly a certain way is because I'm just misaligned. And this is where, if you are an empathic person, or someone who, if you were like me, I thought I had bipolar. I genuinely did, because I couldn't understand how I was just so intense with everything, and I'm trying to understand things on such a deep level. But that is who I am, and I don't dismiss that anymore. I don't see it as a mental health issue, or me being, or any, like, a spiritual guru of any sort. But I just know that that's me now, and I'm trying to utilize it in a positive way without seeing it as a negative thing. And I feel like that is a lot of people that I have around me, that everybody feels like quite emotionally intense about things, but that is because you're not living your truest life. And me stepping into that more, I got rid of toxic relationships. I was doing spiritual practices a lot more. I left England. I realized that once I'd done a lot of the healing work, that my environment still wasn't resonating with me. And that's when I decided to go to Australia. And I was there for just under a year. And again, that was absolutely amazing. I had the best time. I felt the most aligned there than I had done all of my life. It just felt right. But there was still a calling there with trying to understand myself a little bit more, being someone who's mixed race. But I grew up in Britain with British values and British cultures. When I'm on a Bali trip, I met this African American lady, and she was asking me about my culture and things, and I could only explain my British culture. And rather than be puzzled, as if to say, which I find, I will say this, I do find a lot amongst the Black community that Black culture is very much, should be, I don't know what the right term is, but it was almost me, and being someone who is a British mixed race person, I would say I've always felt like that was seen as a negative amongst the Black community. But what they failed to acknowledge is I am mixed race, and I did grow up in Britain, so that is very much a part of my identity and my culture. And my dad wasn't present in my life, other than mum being quite a reggae girl and the odd sort of Caribbean influence growing up, but nobody real like there consistently. I did not know my Caribbean culture or my Jamaican culture, and that is quite an important part of my identity. And I would say I didn't want to say I rejected it, but I kind of accepted my British culture with, well, that's who I am and that's how I am. Um, but then I did sort of get this calling after speaking to this lady on my Bali trip, and she was like, she never come from a place of judgment. She was a bit like, oh, like, well, why don't you explore that a little bit more? And the penny dropped because I just got up and left to go to Australia to go live my best life. And I was a bit like, because she was like, why don't you go to Jamaica? And I was like, well, I've got no connections there. And I was like, when my dad dies, that is all of my Jamaican culture connections gone. And she was like, well, have you got family anywhere else? And I was like, I've got some family in Canada, but you know, we've only met like once and da 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 da. She was like, well, like, why don't you go there? And oh, mum was like, do you know what? This girl, she's onto something here. And I thought I would love to go to get to know a little bit more about my dad's family and my Caribbean roots. And that's kind of what has propelled this journey for me to be here, where I am now in Canada. And that has brought on lots of emotions and lots of new things that I'm exploring with now and that I hope to share with you guys. Is the social element has gone slightly. When I come home from Australia, I felt like a fish out of water. I'd come home and I was a completely different person, and I could no longer slot into where I used to be. I just seen the way of life that people lived around me as completely different, and it was just, I was just so misaligned and disconnected from that part of my life, which was really difficult for me to deal with. I wouldn't say I felt depressed, but I was very emotional. I was crying a lot. Hopefully I can have this is something I'll talk about at a later date, but you know, when I did leave Australia, I did have a situation that really did change me as a person. And I think that also was a catalyst for me being quite disconnected. I was also contending with that sort of situation, and it just really had brought me in myself and made me stop being so outward, which again is what's instigated me doing this channel. It's weird how these things happen and how life can make you just stop, and it's put me on this path that I am now. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's kind of where it started with me. I probably have gone on a lot, but I feel like it is all quite relevant with my spiritual journey. And these things have all started incrementally. They haven't just, I wasn't born with it. I didn't grow up with it. These are all things that spirit or universe has just placed in my lap once the situation's happened and I've wanted to know a little bit more about it. And it's kind of just navigated me towards what it is that I needed to know at that time, whether it be learning about crystals, whether it be learning about personal development, whether it be tarot cards and exploring with that, and then just expanding and wanting to know better and do better and just be a better person. And I think that is a spiritual journey, and that is spirituality, and that is me. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you do resonate with some of the things that I have said in my personal story and where it went for me. I do hope I didn't ramble too much. I really tried to record this so many times. Maybe I did just go on and there was some oversharing. There's a lot that's happened, but you can't get it all in one video. But I hope with what I have shared that people have been able to connect, and I hope that I've been able to inspire some people to take a little bit of control and snap out of that nobody is going to save you, and that we have got to take control of our situation, and we have got to start implementing things that make us feel good, whether that be through the gym, healthy eating, affirmations, meditation, joining spiritual groups, taking things, natural substances that help, whether or not it's pharmaceutical medication, which also played a part in this journey. There's so many different factors that we've got to find that works for us. I hope that I've been able to give people a couple of examples of things that might relate to them. Thank you. Catch you next time. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Bye.